Saburo Sakai could see the writing on the wall. By 1943, Japan's legendary ace was training new pilots. These young men lacked the skills of the old guard. "I found the new generation arrogant and unskilled," Sakai would later recall. The man who had once ruled Pacific skies was now watching Japan's air power crumble. The elite cadre of naval aviators was dying out. Years of brutal war had claimed the best pilots. Their replacements simply couldn't match their abilities. This was the harsh reality facing Japan in early 1944. The stage was set for disaster. American factories churned out fighters faster than Japan could count. New American pilots graduated every month by the thousands. Japanese training programs struggled to find instructors. Most dangerous of all, American tacticians had cracked the code. Air combat was no longer an art form. It had become a cold science. Let's go back to where it all started. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor erupted in flames. American sailors got their first look at a revolutionary fighter. The Mitsubishi A6M-0 wasn't just another warplane. It was aluminum-wrapped perfection armed with cannon. The Zero's birth came from an impossible dream. In 1937, Japan's Navy made an outrageous demand. Designer Jiro Horikoshi had to create the perfect fighter. High speed, incredible turns, long range, heavy guns. Most experts would have laughed. Horikoshi's solution was radical. Strip away everything not needed for fighting. No armor to protect pilots. No fuel tank protection. No heavy parts that might slow things down. The result was a fighter that could dance in the sky. When the first Zero rolled out in 1940, it weighed just 3,700 pounds, nearly a full ton lighter than its future American killer. But the Zero's real strength wasn't just design. It was the hands that flew it. Japan had spent years creating elite pilots. Their training program was so tough only the best survived. These men lived by the samurai code. Death in battle was better than shame. They had sharpened their skills over China. There they faced weak opposition and learned perfect tactics. When Pearl Harbor burned, these pilots had already proven themselves. In China, the Zero achieved a 12-to-1 kill ratio. Early fights with British and Dutch forces only added to the legend. Through the first half of 1942, Allied pilots faced a nightmare. The Zero could outturn any fighter they flew. It could outclimb most of them. Its 20mm cannon could shred aircraft with short bursts. Captain Eric Brown tested captured Zeros later. "I don't think I've ever flown a fighter that could match the Zero's turn rate," he said. The Zero ruled totally until mid-1943. For aces like Saburo Sakai, these were golden days. Sakai himself captured the feeling perfectly. We were invincible. Our Zero could outfight anything the Americans put up. But this total dominance contained deadly seeds. Japan's naval leaders became overconfident. Why develop new fighters when the Zero was already perfect? Why add armor weight when skill could avoid enemy fire? This thinking would prove fatal. American designers were already studying captured Zeros. They were developing countermeasures. The wake-up call came June 4, 1942. Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga crash-landed his Zero on remote Akutan Island. Koga died, but his plane stayed mostly intact. 5 weeks later, Americans found it. When the wreckage reached American engineers, it was an intelligence goldmine. But here's the surprising truth. The F6F Hellcat wasn't designed from zero secrets. By October 1942, when Koga's plane reached test pilots, 2 Hellcat prototypes had already flown. American designers had guessed the Zero's strengths and weaknesses correctly. They used just combat reports to figure it out. The man leading this effort was Leroy Grumman. His company built tough, reliable carrier planes. The F4F Wildcat proved one crucial point. American pilots could survive Zero fights if their planes could take punishment. Grumman took this lesson to heart. When the Navy wanted a Zero killer, Grumman's response was practical. Take the biggest, most powerful engine available, the massive 2,000-horsepower Pratt and Whitney R2800. Build the strongest, most heavily armed fighter around it. Make it fast enough to choose when to fight. Tough enough to survive the experience. The F6F Hellcat was everything the Zero wasn't. Where the Zero was delicate, the Hellcat was tough. Where the Zero relied on turns, the Hellcat used speed and firepower. Where the Zero offered no pilot protection, the Hellcat surrounded him with armor. The numbers told the whole story. The Hellcat weighed nearly twice as much as a Zero when loaded, but its massive engine gave it speed advantage at all altitudes. 6 50-caliber machine guns provided devastating firepower. Most important, the Hellcat could take tremendous punishment and keep flying. Test flights against captured Zeros showed the new fighter's advantages. The Hellcat was faster at all altitudes. It could outclimb the Zero above 14,000 feet. It rolled faster at high speed and could outdive any Japanese fighter. But the Zero kept its edge in low-speed turning. It could still turn inside the bigger American fighter. This data shaped American tactics. Don't dogfight with Zeros. Use speed and altitude advantage to attack. Then dive away before the enemy can respond. The tactic became known as boom and zoom. Dive down, make a firing pass, then zoom, climb away. It played to every Hellcat strength while negating Zero advantages. September 1st, 1943, F6F Hellcats flew their first combat mission. Fighters from USS Independence shot down a Japanese flying boat. This marked the beginning of naval aviation's most successful fighter program. But 3 months later, the Hellcat truly announced its arrival. November 23rd and 24th, 1943. American carriers launched strikes against Tarawa. When Zero fighters rose to meet them, the results were shocking. Hellcat pilots claimed 30 Zero fighters destroyed. They lost just one F6F. The kill ratio that once favored Japan 12-1 had reversed overnight. For Japanese pilots who survived these encounters, the experience was bewildering. Zeros that had ruled Pacific skies for 2 years were suddenly being swatted aside. The Americans weren't just flying better fighters. They were using new tactics that made Japanese advantages worthless. Now let's witness the moment that changed everything. June 24, 1944. High above Iwo Jima, morning sun catches polished aluminum. 15 American fighters streak through Pacific sky. Below them, a lone Japanese Zero climbs desperately. Chief Petty Officer Saburo Sakai squints through his canopy. Something isn't right about the approaching formation. The shapes are too thick, too heavy. As understanding hits like ice in his veins, the lead American fighter rolls into attack. These aren't Japanese planes. They're Grumman F6F Hellcats, the new American fighter that's been tearing Zero squadrons apart. What happens next shows one of aviation history's most dramatic reversals. For nearly 3 years, the Zero had ruled Pacific skies. Now, in a few terrifying minutes, Sakai will experience firsthand how American industrial might created a weapon designed to destroy everything he had mastered. The mathematical precision was still months away. But the ingredients for catastrophe were already mixing. Dawn breaks over the Philippine Sea on June 19, 1944. Aboard Japanese flagship Taiho, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa peers through binoculars. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies the most powerful naval force ever gathered. Task Force 58, 15 American aircraft carriers, 7 battleships, 21 cruisers, 69 destroyers. Over 900 aircraft ready for battle. Ozawa commands Japan's last great hope, the first mobile fleet. 5 fleet carriers, 4 light carriers, 5 battleships. On paper, his 473 aircraft seemed capable of decisive victory. But numbers don't tell the whole story. In American carrier ready rooms, veteran pilots brief for what they sense will be the decisive battle. Lieutenant Alexander Vrasiu checks his 50 caliber guns one final time. Today, he'll shoot down 6 Japanese aircraft in a single mission. The contrast between opposing forces is stark. American pilots average over 300 hours of flight training. Many Japanese pilots now arrive with as little as 100 hours total. Where American aircraft get replaced faster than they're lost, every Japanese plane shot down is irreplaceable. At 8:30 hours, Japanese radar detects the first American strike, but Admiral Ozawa has already committed to his attack plan. 4 massive waves of Japanese aircraft launch toward the American fleet. Over 300 planes in total fly toward the most sophisticated air defense system ever created. American radar tracks their formations from over 150 miles away. Fighter Director Officer Joseph Eggert watches approaching raids on his screen. He calmly guides Hellcat fighters to intercept positions. The first wave of 69 Japanese aircraft encounters something unprecedented. A coordinated wall of 450 American fighters rising to meet them. For veteran Zero pilot Chief Petty Officer Tetsuo Iwamoto, the sight is magnificent and terrifying. The sky fills with more enemy aircraft than he's ever seen. The mathematics of aerial combat are brutal. Japanese formations that once swept aside smaller Allied numbers now face overwhelming opposition. Every Zero is outnumbered nearly 7-1. Worse, they're facing pilots in aircraft designed to exploit their weaknesses. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell demonstrates Hellcat advantages in devastating fashion. Using his fighters' superior speed and climb rate, he positions above the approaching Japanese, then dives through their ranks in slashing attacks. Zero pilots trained for prolonged turning battles find themselves facing enemies who strike once and disappear. For Japanese air crews experiencing this onslaught, the psychological impact equals the physical destruction. The radio frequencies fill with desperate calls as Japanese formations break apart. Yak fighter to base, under attack by large enemy formation, help us, they're everywhere. American fighter director voices provide stark contrast. Bandits bearing 270, Angels 15. Tally-ho, we have them visual. Of the 326 aircraft launched in 4 waves, only 130 returned to their carriers. The rest are shot down or lost to fuel exhaustion. American losses tell a different story entirely. Of nearly 450 fighters engaged, only 29 are lost, many to operational accidents rather than enemy action. Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, Japan's leading ace with over 80 victories, isn't present for the turkey shoot. He's assigned to training duties in Japan. When disaster reports reach him, his reaction reveals Japanese understanding of what occurred. Meeting wounded Saburo Sakai in a hospital, Nishizawa's words capture the reality Japanese aces now face. It's not as you remember, Saburo. There was nothing I could do. There were just too many enemy planes. This admission from one of Japan's most skilled pilots reveals the fundamental shift. The era when individual pilot skill could overcome material disadvantages ending. American pilots are now as skilled as Japanese counterparts, but they're flying superior aircraft in overwhelming numbers. Sakai himself embodies this new reality. When he encounters 15 F6F Hellcats over Iwo Jima, his survival depends not on outfighting them. It depends on evasion skills. Using every trick from hundreds of combat missions, he manages to escape. But he knows he's been hunted rather than hunting. The battle reveals advantages beyond individual aircraft performance. American formations coordinate through radio communications. Fighter directors guide interceptors using real-time radar information. Even American anti-aircraft gunners with proximity shells proved devastatingly effective. Japanese pilots fly aircraft identical to those used at Pearl Harbor. They face American technology that has evolved at breathtaking speed. F6F Hellcats now carry water injection systems, radar for night fighting, improved armor protection. Even the ammunition has been upgraded. Industrial statistics underlying the battle are equally revealing. American factories produce over 2,000 aircraft monthly. Japan struggles to build 500. American training programs graduate 1,500 new naval aviators monthly. Japan manages fewer than 300. As sunset falls on June 19th, Admiral Ozawa counts his losses with growing horror. Over 400 aircraft destroyed, including 346 carrier-based planes that were Japanese naval aviation's core. Equally devastating, the pilots lost include many remaining veterans who could have trained replacements. In a single day, Japan has lost the ability to conduct effective carrier operations. The American reaction is markedly different. Admiral Mark Mitcher's famous order to turn on the lights guides returning pilots safely back, despite revealing the fleet's position to enemy submarines. This confidence demonstrates that American commanders will accept tactical risks. They know they've achieved strategic victory. The balance of power has shifted completely. For Japanese aces who survived the turkey shoot, the battle marks an era's end. Tetsuo Iwamoto, credited with 94 aerial victories, continues fighting until war's end. But he'll never again operate with early war confidence. The sky belongs to America now. Within a month, Japanese Prime Minister Hideki Tojo is forced to resign. For the first time, Japan's high command acknowledges the empire is losing. Saipan, Guam, and Tinian fall to American forces. These provide bases for B-29 bombers that will systematically destroy Japanese cities. Individual Japanese aces adapt as best they can. Some, like Saburo Sakai, survive through skill and luck. Others, like Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, die in transport aircraft, shot down by prowling American fighters. A fate unthinkable in 1942, when Japanese fighters controlled the skies. The few remaining veterans are assigned to defend home islands. Even flying newer aircraft like the N-1K George or J-2M Jack, they face overwhelming numerical disadvantages that make victory impossible. Perhaps most poignant is how this transformation affected men who once embodied Japanese air superiority. These pilots had dedicated their lives to mastering an art form. Technology was rapidly making it obsolete. Years of training, hard-won combat experience, intimate knowledge of once invincible aircraft, all became irrelevant in a few short months. Saburo Sakai's post-war reflections capture this tragedy. I poured about 500 rounds directly into the Grumman. The airplane did not fall, but kept flying. I thought this very odd. It had never happened before. This quote describes an early Grumman encounter. It foreshadows the frustration Japanese pilots would experience. As American aircraft became increasingly tough and American pilots increasingly skilled, the rules of aerial combat governing the first half of the Pacific War were being rewritten. Industrial capacity and technological innovation changed everything. The story of Japanese aces watching their air superiority evaporate offers profound lessons about warfare, technology, and human adaptation. Zero fighters that seemed invincible in 1942 were revealed as products of specific circumstances, facing inferior opposition with superior pilots. When those circumstances changed, the aircraft's fundamental limitations became fatal flaws. The F6F Hellcats' success wasn't just better engineering, it represented a different warfare philosophy. Where Japanese design emphasized perfection through simplification, American design embraced complexity. The Hellcat was fast, tough, heavily armed, and mass-produced. It sacrificed elegance for effectiveness. More importantly, the Hellcat was designed as part of a system. Radar, radio communications, trained fighter directors, improved tactics, better training programs. Overwhelming production capacity all contributed to success. Individual components might be matched by Japanese counterparts, but the integrated whole proved unbeatable. As the war entered its final phase, surviving Japanese aces found themselves in an impossible position. Their aircraft were outmatched, their numbers insufficient, their mission hopeless. Yet many continued flying, not from any expectation of victory, but from duty that went beyond rational calculation. The great irony is that these men helped create Japanese air supremacy, then became witnesses to its destruction. They watched as carefully honed skills became irrelevant. Their legendary aircraft became obsolete. Their way of warfare was superseded by industrial might. The transformation was so complete that by war's end, American naval aviation claimed over 5,000 aerial victories, with more than 300 pilots achieving ace status, most flying Hellcats. The majority of victories came at the expense of Japanese aircraft and pilots once considered invincible. In the end, the story is more than technological competition. It's human drama about the cost of change, the weight of tradition, the brutal efficiency of industrial warfare. These pilots didn't just lose air superiority. They witnessed the end of an entire era of aerial combat, one where individual skill and perfect aircraft design could overcome any disadvantage. The age of the samurai warrior of the sky had ended. The age of mass-produced, technology-driven air power had begun. For men who lived through that transition, the memory would last a lifetime, assuming they survived to remember it. The Pacific skies that once echoed with Zero engines now belonged to new fighters and pilots. Mathematical precision of American industrial warfare had solved air-to-air combat, turning it from individual art into systematic science. For Japanese aces who survived to see Japan surrender, the war's end came not as surprise, but as inevitable conclusion to a transformation they had witnessed firsthand. The day they realized their air superiority was gone forever,